Hey, what's up everybody? It's Grizz from Red Force TCG, your home for everything competitive One Piece. Today we're going to be going over a Bonney list that I've been playing a lot on the rank sim this last week and that we're using as a part of our preparations for Nats. I think the deck's pretty cool. I've been playing it a bunch and yeah, I'm excited to kind of go over it with you guys and kind of share what we have. If you guys want to take a second and subscribe, we'd really appreciate it. If you guys find value in it and you guys want to see more of this content, we'd love to have you guys on board. But first, we want to thank our sponsor for this video, which is Euphoria.
Wow!
Euphoria is a local game store to us, and they have a TCG player store that stocks a bunch of singles. And if you're like me, you need singles for a bunch of different games. So if you guys want to help us out, you guys want to buy your singles, scan the QR code on your screen, and you'll be taken directly to their store, where you can shop a variety of singles. Again, thanks to Euphoria for being an awesome sponsor. Let's get into the video. Alright guys, so here we have the Bonney list. I've been playing this predominantly on Rank Sim this last week. I've just been testing it. I'm kind of going through an exploratory phase still and just trying to test a bunch of decks for Nats. This is one of the decks I wanted to hit. It's been really cool. It's a very unique playstyle compared to the other decks in the format, and this is kind of what we came to. So yeah, let's go over it. The first kind of thing I want to talk about is, to kind of understand the list, is we actually cut Baby 5 Searcher altogether. At first I was kind of skeptical on it, but what I realized is when you cut Baby 5, you're only relying on Bonney, you have more of a consistency to hit the supernovas that you actually want to hit. Predominantly Basil, things like Cavendish, and Urog. This helps you just kind of make sure that you can find the pieces that you need, and you're not like, oh, I have Baby 5 in hand at the beginning of the game, let me play the Baby 5, and then you bomb decking, 2 Basils at 2k, and so on and so forth. The opposite could be said. You can bottom deck Dofis and things like that, but overall I think this is a pretty consistent way to play the deck, and I haven't missed Baby 5. So we are playing 4 copies of Bonney as our predominant searcher, and with that, since we're only playing kind of the Supernova engine, we have 8 copies of Scratch Bandit Pooh. The 1 cost doesn't come up very much. He's kind of just a searchable 2k. The 2 cost is actually pretty good into Nami. You can just tap down one of their Dawn. You're just taxing them, which the more tools we can have against Nami, specifically for nationals, but for Bonney in general, I think is fine. I think it's a good include. We got a few copies of Rosinante. Rosinante's a good role player. He's kind of a curve filler. He specifically synergizes really well with 8-drop Kid that we'll get to later. Yeah, he kind of just does his job. He's a low-cost blocker that can make your board a little stickier against black, which can be hard, kind of a hard matchup. So he's been good. You don't really need to search him out. He's not a core piece of the deck, but he's a good role player. And then for the next set of 2Ks, we wanted 12, and we decided to play Izo. You might have some 4-cost blockers that you might want to tap, think Borsalino, things of that nature. And it just felt like the most utility thing you could play. This could really be anything. If you really have a 2K that you would like to play, this would kind of be the spot for it. But we think Izo does a good job. But getting into like the kind of the core of the deck, for Uroj, he's kind of your bread and butter of your early game and getting into your mid game. He's a 4-cost 5k, and he's a blocker, and at the end of your turn you restand a Dawn for Bonney's leader effect. This just lets you be really Dawn efficient, and just lets you use all of your Dawn for your plays as opposed to like needing to leave one up to use the thing that makes your deck good. So Uro is really important. He's really important to see early, and is just kind of fantastic. Cavendish is also a very, very good card. All of these mid-game cards are very good for the deck. Cavendish is a 5-cost, but when he enters play or attacks, if he's the only Cavendish, you untap 2 Dawn. Again, Dawn efficiency, being able to have more opportunities to leave up leader effect while developing a body. And then if they don't deal with the Cavendish, he just kind of runs away with it. He just generates more and more and more value. So he's kind of a must remove for your opponent, but he's a very good card that draws out removal and just does a really good job helping the deck kind of bridge the gap in the middle game. Same thing with Bonney, the 5-cost Bonney. Being able to tap down, or not tap down rather, but freeze one of your opponent's characters or Dawn, just gives you a lot of options with your leader effect. If you can leave up your leader effect and play this Bonney, there's a lot of board states that you really don't have to worry about, because, you know, if they have like 2 characters, one's rested, one's not, you can freeze the rested one. You know you're going to get your value on either their leader swing or when they swing with the character. So it just helps you deal with a lot of stuff. Kind of, again, we're a late game deck. We want to bridge from the mid game to the late game as efficiently and as safely as possible, and Bonney helps us do that. The king of that is definitely Basil. Basil's insane for this deck. He's definitely like one of the key cards. He's just a really big blocker that it makes it really hard. Basil in tandem with the leader effect makes it really hard for your opponent to make really good attack sequences into you. And he's also a fantastic attacker. You know, if they want to attack into it, it's still a 7k. And he's forcing 2 cards out of your opponent's hand. So he's very good, very hard to remove with his ability of, you know, anytime he would be removed. You can just tap down one of their guys instead. So very, very strong. Just kind of does everything that the deck kind of wants to do. So yeah, just fantastic card. Now kind of getting into the top end of the deck, we have 4 Hody. Hody is great because it kind of builds on an already established board. They're not, you know, you wouldn't expect green to have this other attack coming through. So for the cost of like taking one of your life and drawing that card, you get to have this other 8k body while also tapping down 2 guys that can just be really beneficial to, like, you know, either swing into with the Hody, or maybe you're making some other, you know, smaller chip swings with like your board, like maybe you have a Cavendish or an Urog, something along those lines. So he's just really good at controlling board. He can also be really good for going for game. You know, if it's really late game, they're at 1 life. You know, sometimes playing the Hody and swinging your leader for 7 and then Hody for 9, or your leader for 8 and Hody for, or your leader for 8 and then Hody for 8. Can get there. So just overall a very flexible card, a very powerful card. So that's why I run 4 copies of it. Next we have 2 copies of 8-Drop Kid. 8-Drop Kid has felt a little bit less needed, but there are some board states where, like, you have an Urog, you play a Basil, and then if you either, you know, happen to search this 8-Drop Kid, or he's in your hand, or you're on purpose because it's a good matchup for 8-Drop Kid. You're finding him, playing him down. He stalls the game an extra 2-3 turns, and then you're able to, like, maybe play a Zoro or a Dofi over it, and kind of seal up the late game and seal the win. So he does a really good job at controlling the mid and the late game, and that's why he's in here. But yeah, so still a very good card, but only choosing to run him at 2 copies. We chose to move Zoro up to 3 because just slamming down a Zoro if you're healthy is such a big threat. It's absolutely, I have to remove this for your opponent, and it's just a very good card at assembling pressure and putting your opponent in check. If it ever goes unanswered, like I said, you're in a super, super good spot. You're just going to be swinging, like, you know, whatever your board is. Maybe you leave a Basil and then just swing like 999 and, you know, have your leader ability a block, and, like, you know, if you're at high life total, that's even better, like Bonney wants to do. But Zoro, very good boss monster. Unfortunately not searchable, as is Dofi. But the game's going on long enough that we should be able to see some copies of Hody, Zoro, and Dofi. Moving into Dofi, awesome boss monster. The only downside on him is that you won't be able to use your leader ability unless you already have an Urog out, which can be fine. Locking down 3 bodies is really powerful while establishing this 10k. He absolutely can run away with the game if you ever have back-to-back of these. The tempo swings are just crazy, and he just does a really good job at kind of like, once you're in late game, he kind of like steals the late game, and if your opponent doesn't answer him, he kind of can just run away with the game completely and seal it up for you. And then we run just 4 copies of the 0 for 3 event. You know, we wanted to make sure that if we were under a bunch of pressure and we had a bunch of our top end, that we could easily just you know, kind of exchange that for some more counter in the early and mid game, and in the late game as well. So Overall, this deck's been pretty consistent. I've been having some decent success with it. It's in the running for Nats. I'm not sure if it's the playstyle I want to go with, but overall, I think you guys should give this a try. I think this is a really good build. And yeah, let's go on to her matchups. Okay, guys, so here we have Bonney's matchups. I just want to preface this by saying, this is kind of a amalgamation of our team's opinions and some of the rank sim data. So, if you disagree with some of this, or if you found some ways to make some of these matchups better or worse, that's totally valid. This is kind of just what we found, mixed with some of the data coming out of the rank sim. So the green check mark doesn't necessarily mean that they're good matchups. It just means that you're either fine with seeing this deck or that they are good matchups. So I just want to preface that with saying that I do believe everything in the red circle category is bad. So just take that also, that caveat needs to be said. But so Bonney's good matchups, I think we see a lot of decks with really high value if you have a good matchup into them, like Black Yellow Luffy, one of the best decks in the format. As well as Reiju. I think that's probably the most up and coming deck. So I think our team, is kind of split on the Reiju. Is she favored? Is she not? The rank sim says that Bonney is favored. I think our team thinks it might be a little bit Reiju favored. So test that one, yourself and make sure you understand that matchup. But yeah, having a great matchup into Black Yellow Luffy is obviously a fantastic boon for the deck, as well as beating all the yellow players is never a bad thing. With good win rates into Enel and Katakuri. Just Bonney does really well against these big bodies that that she gets high value from tapping down with her leader ability, even if we have to go to late game. Like normally you wouldn't want to go to the late game with Enel, but with Bonney we're just amassing so much value with the leader ability and then our own characters with like Zoro that the bad matchups, it's a little bit hard. Like both of the black decks being kind of a hard matchup is tough. It's really, really tough. I expect the black decks, especially on Nats, to be highly represented and moving forward. So it's hard to say like, oh yeah, like I think I'm going to bring Bonney when her two worst matchups are the two black decks, but I don't think they're unwinnable bad. Moria definitely is harder. Lucci, I think we found a good strategy that works, and we're going to go into that in a second. But yeah, being bad against black, take it how you will. Just be aware of it. And then same thing with blue. It's kind of funny, Bonney's bad matchups are just black and blue. But yeah, Boa, Dofi, Nami, they're all decks that are able to run the blue removal suite of the 7 cost. That's name escaping me, Gravity Blade, which is really, really tough for our deck to deal with. As well as pudding can definitely hurt, things of that nature. While they're able to, kind of keep, with the 7 Warlords package, develop 2 bodies a turn. Nami is doing Nami things. The kind of the general overview is, your bad matchups, black, you don't want them to be removing your stuff because we're only playing 1 guy a turn. Blue is kind of doing a good job of tempoing you out. Good matchups, a lot of the slower decks. Bonney's kind of the queen of the late game. So kind of take that how you will. That's just kind of a brief overview so you guys can have an idea that if you want to pick up the deck or you've been playing the deck, this is kind of what you should be expecting. The next thing I want to talk about is something I want to start doing, which is just some general gameplay tips for the deck we're talking about. I want to give you guys a little bit more value if I can. Number one, don't be too greedy with your mulligans, but keep the matchup in mind. If you need certain cards for a matchup, you should definitely be considering that when you're weighing your mulligan decision. But if you open playable, you're going second, you open Uroj and you open Basil, you might just want to keep that, we're able to go late game, so you're able to see more cards and you're able to kind of, see the things that you want to see. So try to be a little bit more conservative on your mulligan, but definitely, if we're playing against Nami, we might want to be hard mulliganing for Zoro Hody, things of that nature. So try to keep that in mind. Keep in mind what cards you want for certain matchups. That's what part of what makes the deck strong is that it has certain cards that are really strong in each matchup. And it's sort of like a toolbox style deck. So just keep that in mind. And I think, from the beginning of the game, you'll be in a good spot. The next thing is to counter out early to preserve life. Like I said, we kind of want to get to this late game, and countering out early before we're getting major value for our leader ability will help us be at a higher life total, so that way in the mid game either we can take hits or we can just continue to be on the high life total now that our leader ability is gaining more and more value. and it just feels really good for them to kind of be squirming to sequence around your leader ability and your blockers, and the fact that like your life total is still high while you're kind of chipping them every turn, you know, trying to get like maybe 1 life a turn from them. So that's the thing that I've had a lot of success with, is just kind of being very defensive early, and you know, giving them a 1k for their first swing. You know, not always. You play every game how it presents itself, but I think that's a good overall thing to be looking out for, if you're already not doing that, or you know, something else to keep in mind. I didn't have a good way to put this, attack pattern or life / board, but I wanted to kind of to bring up that, you know, you should keep in mind, you know, your sequencing, and Bonney heavily rewards knowing what you can do. So for example, you know, if they have like a rested character and unrested character, knowing if you want to swing at that character or not, or if the leader ability can kind of take care of it. So for example, if they only have 1 rested character, you don't really need to swing into it, and you can kind of swing everything life, because your leader ability is going to take care of 1 attack anyway. And if they only have that 1 character and the leader to attack with, then your leader ability has already got you covered. Now past 2, 3 attacks, you know, you may want to start going for board to kind of minimize the amount of attacks being done. So just keep that in mind. You're probably able to swing life a little bit more than you realize, especially if you're leaving blockers up. So definitely just kind of look at the board, say, analyze, can I go for this attack, or do I have to go for the board here? How much value is my leader ability getting? Am I leaving out blockers? Am I not? So definitely just think about that when you're doing your attack sequencing, and don't be afraid to, you know, send some of these guys at life, especially Basil. He's a great attacker. Don't be afraid to kind of turn that guy sideways if you're not in any pressure of dying. Specifically against Lucci, what we found to be good is just to be as aggressive as possible. You know, we don't want to be playing 1 guy a turn and then for them, you know, blowing up our guy a turn. So whenever a guy lives, being able to swing with him, just trying to get as much pressure on them as possible, been a really good way to try to shore up the matchup. If you can be really aggressive in the early and mid game, and then drop a Zoro on them, it feels very good. And then if they can't deal with that Zoro, you kind of just went on the spot. So just try to be really aggressive. You know, it's one of our bad matchups, so mulligan aggressively, find a good hand, and just try to go for their life as much as possible. That's just kind of the most consistent way that we found to beat Lucci, so keep that in mind. As well as, you know, just in general, with this deck, it heavily rewards knowing your matchups, knowing what cards you have, what cards your opponent has, how it interacts. So you know, once you play the deck more, knowing what your play lines are, and knowing how those apply to each different matchup is huge. And that just comes with time. You know, I'll give you some examples. Zoro and Hody for Nami is really important. 1 or more Basils for black, as well as the Rosinante, as well can be a super good setup to have against black. Against yellow, a 10 cost Dofi is amazing. So try to keep that in mind, and I think you'll have some pretty good success here with Bonney. But yeah, that's kind of it for the video, guys. If you guys found some value there, feel free to like and subscribe, and we'd really appreciate it. Thanks again to our sponsor, Game Euphoria, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you next time. See ya. Peace.